And we're in this Sunday morning with the final stretch of election 2024, with just 16 days until Election Day on November 5th. And the momentum seeming to favor President Trump, as polls show voters are prioritizing the economy and immigration and trust President Trump more on these issues. Joining me now with more on the state of the race is independent Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. Senator, it's an honor to have you this morning. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
You are an independent senator, but you caucus with the Democrats. Do you agree that Kamala Harris is losing some momentum? And what is her message to voters right now?
Well, I was out in Michigan and Wisconsin. We had rather huge crowds of young people, of trade unionists, so I don't believe that's the case. I think, look, the average American is angry. They're seeing the very richest people in this country becoming richer, while 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. Over the last 50 years, wages have been stagnant. And what I think ordinary Americans are saying is, you know what? What about an economy and a government that works for all of us, not just the 1%? What about an economy in which we do not have three people on top owning more wealth than the bottom half of American society? What about an economy in which we join the rest of the industrialized world, guarantee health care to all people as a human right, and where we don't pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs? Those are the issues, I think, Maria, that are galvanizing the American people. And I think if you look at those issues, people are going to turn out and vote for Kamala Harris.
And of course, these are the issues that are important to working people for sure. Senator, you are spot on. And I want to get your take on what's going on with the unions right now, because it seems that the unions have waning support for Kamala Harris and increasing support for Donald Trump. Now, Trump was in Detroit last week. He was promising an automotive revolution for U.S. automakers, for the unions, by ensuring that cars are made here in America and not cheaply in Mexico. He threatened using tariffs to make the point. Watch this, Senator. Got to get your reaction. So your thinking is the threat of a 200% tariff will stop them from taking the car. So you won't actually have to do it, so you're not going to actually push prices higher.
I never until now I said 200. I'm using that just as a figure.
But you say 200 a lot.
Oh, I'll say 100, 200, I'll say 500. I don't care. They're not going to bring cars into this country from Mexico and destroy what car companies we have left. But much more than that, I'm going to protect when a company comes to the United States. We're going to have a lot of companies come in because of all of the other things we can do.
So, Senator, President Trump feels that just the threat of tariffs is going to achieve his goal. What specific policy is Kamala Harris advocating to achieve that goal?
Well, let me just say, Maria, you're looking at a senator and former congressman who voted against all these disastrous trade agreements, NAFTA, PNTR with China, and so forth and so on. So the goal is to rebuild the manufacturing sector in America in general, the automobile industry. But I would point out to you, there is a reason why the United Automobile Workers, the guys who do the work in the automobile industry, are strongly supporting Kamala Harris. So what we need, I don't think you need a wall. I don't think you need to say that foreign, stuff can't come into America. That will just raise prices exponentially. But what you do need is a fair trade policy. You can't have corporations throwing American workers out on the street, going to Mexico, going to China. That has got to stop.
Well, what specific policy is Kamala Harris advocating to actually make that happen, to ensure that that auto sector does get the jobs that they require?
Well, in fact, she is proposing to make sure that we do not subsidize corporations who are moving out of this country. I was just at the John Deere plant in Iowa, and they're getting corporate welfare, and then they're thinking of moving to Mexico. That is not acceptable. She's also thinking about investing significantly to rebuild the automobile industry in this country.
Well, the investing obviously costs money. We just came off of this $7 trillion in spending, which obviously led to the inflation spike that we saw. Do you have concerns that this green agenda...
Maria, may I interrupt you?
Yes,
Can I interrupt you on that one, please?
Sir, yes.
All right, look. All right. Did we invest in helping working class families during the COVID pandemic? We did. I was the chairman of the budget committee. I worked on that. So the folks out there who got that $1,400 check when people were losing their jobs and small businesses were going under, yeah, we did that. We put money into hospitals so the people get the health care they need. If you want to ask my view, and many economists, The reason that we saw a spike in inflation, which is now going down, was not because of that, because of corporate greed, record-breaking profits on the part of food industry, other corporations charging us off-the-wall prices. I think that had a lot to do with inflation.
Well, I mean, how can you prove that? Because in the prior years, companies were making billions as well, right? But in the 4 years where we saw inflation spike to up 9.1%, it came on the heels of all of that spending, $7 trillion in spending. Did you go overboard with the spending after COVID?
Look, Maria, I will never forget, and I think your viewers will never forget, the kind of world we were living in during COVID. People were flocking to hospitals.
Absolutely.
Couldn't accommodate them. You know, small businesses were going under. People were afraid to go to work. People were dying going to work. We responded. And by the way, if you look at Joe Biden's popularity record, you know when he was most popular? It's after we passed the American Rescue Plan. We saved childcare. We saved hospitals. We saved colleges. So I don't apologize. But to your point, take a look at the kind of profits that are in the food industry, in the oil industry. They've been raising their prices exponentially and ripping off the American consumer, in my view.
Well, I know that the margins are very small in those industries, but I guess my point here is that do you have concerns that the climate change agenda, the Green New Deal, the green agenda, which is such a priority for you and so many Democrats, is really not aligned with where the American people are, who are more worried about making ends meet, inflation, immigration, economy?
Good. All right, fair question, Maria. But let me turn it around on you. And what we have got to ask ourselves, having seen what went on in Florida recently, right? What went on in North Carolina, the forest fires that we have seen, the droughts that we are seeing. In my own state of Vermont, we're seeing more weather disturbances than we've ever seen. Despite Donald Trump thinking that climate change is a hoax, it is not a hoax. The entire scientific community understands that if we do not, Maria, get a handle on climate change with the whole world, you know what? I worry very much about the planet that our kids and future generations are going to be living in.
Well,
now, we got to
do
do this in a sensible way.
Yeah. No, I think we all do.
I agree.
I mean, Republicans worry
But
about the environment as well, by the way. But I guess, Senator,
But it's not a question of the environment. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Critics say, Senator, that one issue with Kamala Harris is that they're just unclear as far as what her principles are, where she stands on all of these important issues. For example, she has long said that she would ban fracking, and then she said she wouldn't ban fracking. She said she was for Medicare for all, and then she says, no, I'm not for Medicare for all. Then she said her values haven't changed, and she wouldn't do anything different than Joe Biden did. So I guess I ask you, do you believe Kamala Harris has changed? Will she agree to fracking? And if she does agree to fracking, is that a betrayal to you?
Well, I wouldn't use the word betrayal. People's points of view change. Look, as I've just indicated, I think we have to work with the entire world to save the planet for our kids and our grandchildren. And I think what's very dangerous, is Donald Trump thinking climate change is a hoax. No scientist agrees with him. In terms of Medicare for all, look, let me be very frank. I think our current system is broken, dysfunctional. Its goal is to make billions in profits for the drug companies and the insurance companies, while millions of people can't afford the health care they need. That is my view. That is not Kamala Harris's view. She supports the Affordable Care Act, wants to expand it. It's a different approach.
Senator, I want to ask you, I got to switch gears here. I want to ask you, we're going to talk with four-star General Jack Keane in a couple of minutes about Israel taking down another terrorist who really was the architect of the October 7th attack on Israel. You've been urging President Biden to not send weapons to Israel for this war. And to those people who are supportive of those weapons to Israel, they want answers. So I guess, how do you answer those people who say it was Israel that was attacked on October 7th? And they are retaliating for this. They're defending itself. And you're saying stop sending the weapons in the middle of Israel's fight for literally their survival.
Okay, Maria, let's be clear, all right? Hamas is a terrible terrorist organization that began this war with a horrific attack against Israel on October 7th. No one denies that. Sinwar, who has just been killed, is a war criminal. No one denies that. So the issue is not whether Israel has a right to defend itself. It does. But does it have a right to kill 42,000 Palestinians, two-thirds of whom are women, children, and the elderly? Does it have a right today to block humanitarian aid and starve children?
Well, I don't think they're blocking humanitarian aid. They're not blocking humanitarian aid.
Maria, the evidence, Maria, if I can say this, I mean, check what all of the organizations are saying. They are blocking humanitarian. Children by the thousands are dealing with malnutrition, are starving. So I think Israel has a right to defend itself, but it does not have a right to go to war against children and women in Gaza and destroy their entire society. That
Senator,
I do not agree with.
I've got to get your take on the process here before we go. The process of which Kamala Harris was put in place. She was selected, not elected. And I feel like you went through a similar situation back in 2015, 16. You were winning. You had garnered great support from so many people, including a lot of young people. But the machine didn't want you there. They got behind Hillary Clinton, and she was the candidate then, and you were out. It seems like a similar situation right now where the machine decided Joe Biden was out and they just selected Kamala Harris. Do you think voters will be turned off by that, this election?
Yeah, I think it was clearly an unusual process. There's no question about it. We've never seen anything like this. But, Maria, what I would also say when we talk about a process, I don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, or independent. What I see out there is people are disgusted with the amount of money coming into the political process. And it's on both sides. But you got 3 Republicans putting in over $200 million to Trump's campaign. That ain't good. Nor is it good that billionaires are supporting, Kamala Harris. What we need to do is end the Citizens United Supreme Court decision and get this kind of big money out of politics so we can be a democracy. You get a vote, I get a vote, not billionaires buying elections.
And it's the reason people get so upset, by the way, over George Soros and his support of the Democrat Party.
Yeah, it's both sides. I'm not denying that.
Yeah.
But
Senator,
right now you have more cuts. All right, go ahead.
It's wonderful to have you this morning, Senator. Please finish your thought.
No, that's all. It is both sides. I think you're seeing more concentration of billionaire money coming into Trump.
Senator, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We so appreciate it. I hope you'll come back soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Surprised this week to see the media critique and misread my exclusive interview with President Trump last weekend when he responded to my question about whether outside agitators would emerge to create chaos on Election Day should it appear that Trump was winning. Instead, most media outlets cut out my question entirely to suggest Trump wanted the military to take down his political enemies. Here's a clip. But I'm just wondering if these outside agitators will start up on Election Day. Let's say you win. I mean, let's remember you've got 50,000 Chinese nationals in this country in the last couple of years. Yeah. You've got people on the terrorist watch list, 350 in the last couple of years. You've got, like you said, 13,000 murderers and 15,000 rapists. Right. What are you expecting? Joe Biden said he doesn't think it's going to be a peaceful Election Day.
Well, he doesn't have any idea what's happening in all fairness. He spends most of his day sleeping. I think the bigger problem is the enemy from within, not even the people that have come in and destroying our country. By the way, totally destroying our country. The towns, the villages, they're being inundated. But I don't think they're the problem in terms of Election Day. I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military, because they can't let that happen.
Following my interview, Democrats and many mainstream media outlets constructed their own political narrative without including the full context of the Q&A about outside agitators on Election Day. Among the media outlets that ran misleading headlines, NPR, Vanity Fair, The Guardian, many others. And this is how the interview was covered on television. Watch this.
In a Fox News interview, the former president also suggested using the military to go after what he called the enemy from within on Election Day.
It comes as former President Trump is deploying increasingly inflammatory rhetoric against his rival and suggesting using the military against what he described as domestic enemies.
We're at the point where he's saying, I'm going to use the National Guard and the military to take my political enemies out of the country.
But I'm talking about Donald Trump saying that he wants to use the National Guard and the military to go after the left. That's what he's saying.
On the campaign trail, Trump this weekend stepping up his anti-immigrant rhetoric and suggesting he might use the military against, quote, radical left lunatics on Election Day.
Senator, you are spot on. And I want to get your take on what's going on with the Unions right now about outside agitators on Election Day. Should it appear that Trump was winning?
Against, quote, radical left lunatics on Election Day.
Joining me now in the Sunday Morning Futures exclusive is Trump Organization Executive Vice President and the son of the 45th President, Eric Trump. Eric, great to see you. Thank you for being here. Your reaction.
Thanks, Maria. Listen, my reaction is very simple. I've lived this for 10 years, Maria. I mean, it started with the dirty dossier where they made up the most unthinkable things about my father. Then they went to the Russia hoax, and that hung over my father's presidency for a 3-year period of time. Then they tried to impeach him the first time. Then they went after Brett Kavanaugh. Then they tried to impeach him the second time. Then they raided his home. They raided Melania's closet. They raided, Barron's room. Then they tried to take him off the ballot in Colorado. Then they tried to take him off the ballot in Maine. Then they weaponized every AG and DA in Atlanta, in New York, in Washington, D.C. to go after my father. Then you had, Page and Strzok and Comey. You had me getting 111 subpoenas. You had them ban him from Twitter, ban him from Facebook, ban him from Instagram. Then I mean, where do you want me to stop? And that's exactly what my father's talking about. That's the enemy within. You see ABC, you see 60 Minutes. They literally take Kamala Harris interviews and they edit them. They edit them to make her sound intelligent, to make her sound smart when she totally botches the questions. I mean, between the censorship and the legal lawfare and the political lawfare and the corruption and the weaponization of every political institution, there are tremendous enemies within, and there's not a single person, Maria, watching us right now. There's not a single people who haven't felt the degradation of our government and our system and our country under these people.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying in terms of the enemy from within, but what I'm saying is President Trump, and I know that you've heard your father talk about how he likes to weave. He goes to lots of different places, and then he weaves in the answer to your question at the end. And here, I was specifically asking him about the idea of outside agitators coming out, creating chaos on Election Day, should it appear that he was winning. And here, I mean, the media did not even include my question. I mean, it was amazing. Sure. Outlet after outlet, they took out my question on outside agitators entirely, and they just ran him talking about Adam Schiff or the enemy within and getting the National Guard. That's what I was
Maria,
referring to, and that was just really so incredible to me. They all
Maria,
did it.
We've seen these outside agitators do it. They were leaving pallets of bricks on street corners in Chicago and in New York and in Minneapolis and in Portland, all over the place. People are going up, grabbing a brick, throwing it through a store window. We've seen this. This is what they've done time and time again. There's a lot of money that does agitate elections, that does agitate for the other side, and you better believe it's a very dangerous thing.
Eric, let me ask you about the money, because you just heard Senator Bernie Sanders talk about billionaires who are supporting President Trump. And I know that we've talked a lot about Elon Musk, but when you compare it to the billionaires on the Democrat side, what do you want to say about that? I did mention George Soros, but I'm getting lots of feedback here after that interview saying, how can you say that Republicans have all the billionaires when in fact we know it's the opposite? What do you think it is?
Yeah, well, Maria, I started laughing because I just happen to remember back to 2016 where my father funded pretty much his entire campaign because, he didn't have Hollywood and he didn't have those supporters, right? I think he raised $300 million, and I think Hillary Clinton raised $1.5 billion, including the super PAC. So it made me kind of chuckle when he talks about how there's more money in Republican politics than Democrat. I mean, they've had all of Hollywood for years and years and years. Look at these George Clooney fundraisers where they go out and they pull 300 people and they raise $100 million. I really don't want to hear it about, too much money in Republican politics where they won that. It's interesting where my father has done incredibly well is from people donating $12 and $19 and doing that in masses because this country absolutely adores that man right on your screen. And not the people who are writing the $100 million checks.
All right, we will leave it there. Good to see you, Eric Trump. Thank you so much. Trump Organization Executive Vice President Eric Trump. Thank you. And now this. Up next, Barack and Michelle.
Same kinds of energy and turnout in all quarters of our neighborhoods and communities as we saw when I was running. I also want to say that seems to be more pronounced with the brothers. You're coming up with all kinds of reasons and excuses. I've got a problem with that because part of it makes me think, and I'm speaking to men directly now, part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president.
And that was former President Barack Obama with a message for black men over their lack of enthusiasm for Kamala Harris's run for the White House. In a new poll from the New York Times, 20% of black men say they are voting for former President Trump. 70% said that they are backing Vice President Kamala Harris, which is down from 85% who supported President Biden in 2020. Joining me now with reaction is the former HUD Secretary, Dr. Ben Carson, and former Georgia Senate candidate and College Football Hall of Famer, Herschel Walker. Gentlemen, thanks very much for being here. I've got to get your reaction to Obama. Dr. Carson.
Well, Maria, thanks for having us. I always appreciate your courageous and logical approach. You know, Obama is basically falling back on the race and identity politics and saying, you know, she's black and you're black, therefore you should be voting for her. But I think there are a lot of people who are starting to analyze things in a more complex fashion. And they're looking at their lives under the Trump administration, which was not that long ago, so you don't have to look very far back, and see that economically you were much better off. We had highest black home ownership, lowest unemployment, highest take-home wages. You know, the list goes on in terms of the positives that were there. And I think some people are starting to look at that. And, you know, I understand the herd mentality. You know, I grew up in Detroit and in Boston and went to school in New Haven, Ann Arbor, practiced in Baltimore, all very liberal places. And so I know that herd mentality and that you're not supposed to move away from that herd mentality without being accused of all kinds of ridiculous things. But the fact of the matter is, people are starting to make that move. They're starting to be courageous. They're starting to think for themselves. And that's why you're seeing the migration away. I think you'll see it even further. And, you know, I used to think that way too. And then I did something that you're not supposed to do as a Democrat. I listened to a Republican, and that was Ronald Reagan. And I said, he sounds just like my mother. You know, no excuses, personal responsibility, hard work. And those are the things that really led to success in our society.
Herschel, how do you see it?
Well, it was totally insulting. It was very insulting, and I want to say hello to Dr. Carson because he's a pioneer. But at the same time, I want to say, you know, this happens every election year. People of color becomes important. And then they start offering you everything, but yet you see where you're at when the election is over. They forget about you. They forget about you. And I want to say right now, you know, I've known President Trump since '84, and you know what he says he does. You remember opportunity zones. You remember that he was trying to do things with historically black colleges. So he was thinking about sustainability. And that's something that Kamala Harris is not even thinking about. You know, we want sustainability, not for you to give us trinkets. They just want to give you trinkets just for you to get a vote. And that's the problem that we have. And that's what I want everyone out there to know, whether you're of color, is that people of color want the same as everyone else. They want the energy prices to be down. They want the food prices to be down. They don't want you to give them trinkets. They want you to give them sustainability. And that's what President Obama didn't talk about. He just talked about scolding you, like he's upset because you can think for yourself. And thank you, Dr. Carson, for saying that you saw a Republican and you saw that, wait a minute, she sounds just like my parents. They want me to have an education. They want me to go out and do something that get a job. Did they talk about giving a person of color a job? Did he talk about giving him education? No.
Well, it's a great point because speaking of trinkets, Dr. Carson, Kamala did come out with what she's calling a plan for black men. And she says she's going to give you up to $20,000 in a forgivable loan. So here's up to $20,000. Make sure you vote for me. And then she said that she was going to make it legal for black men to start marijuana businesses. I mean, these were her plans. You don't really hear detail on it because she doesn't come out and do press conferences or speak to the people. She wouldn't even take responsibility for the border in Bret Baier's fantastic interview with her last week.
I think it's very informative just to watch her, and you understand why they have tried to hide her in the beginning. That was the plan. Now it's kind of too late to come out with her plans, but her plans don't make any sense. And they're identity-based. and not based on any factual things. And the fact of the matter is, even though she's moved away from a lot of her very radical positions, at least she wants you to think she has. But when she said, my values haven't changed, that was her signal to the left that you don't have to worry. I will say what I need to say to get elected, but I'm the same person. And you can believe that they understand that, because if they didn't, they'd be rioting in the streets.
Well, which is why I asked Senator Bernie Sanders, if in fact he would be insulted or betrayed if in fact she did now flip-flop and keep the flip-flop in terms of going forward with fracking. And I know, Herschel, you wanted to react to Bernie Sanders.
Well, first of all, I'm in the food industry, and he is totally wrong. We're not out there gouging our prices. I'm just trying to make it. I've been in it for 25 years, and I don't think he ever ran a business. And Maria, I want you to know, I was in Athens, Georgia, when Lincoln Riley was killed. It devastated not only that family, but that campus. And they said that they don't like the term the enemy within. Well, they are the enemy within, because when you let illegal come into this country and kill an American citizen, or you have illegals coming into this country taking over apartment units, it's not just a few of them. That is an enemy within, and that's what they're letting happen right now. They're not addressing the border. They're not addressing this economy. They're not addressing things that affect American citizens. And we, people of color, are American citizens just like everyone else, and we want the same as everyone else. And people coming into this country is not right. Right now, we want a secure border. We want to get this economy down, and we have to work together to get that done. And right now, I don't think the left want to do that. They want to continue to point fingers. If you remember on Brett Baer, all she said was Trump, Trump, Trump. Well, I've known President Trump, and he has not changed. He cares about this country. What president has ever been affected like he's been affected? He's been attempted assassination twice, and he's still trying to fight for this country.
Do either of you believe that Trump is racist, Dr. Carson?
Not at all. I've been around him for the last 10 years. And all the people at Mar-a-Lago and at Trump Towers, they love him. They've been there for a long time. You notice that the people with Kamala Harris don't stick with her very long. And that should tell you a lot about the person's character.
Yeah, it's an important point. Gentlemen, great to have you this morning. I hope you'll come back soon, both. Thank you so much. Dr. Ben Carson, Herschel Walker, we will see you soon.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, gentlemen. Now this.
The axis of terror that was built by Iran is collapsing before our eyes. Nasrallah is gone. His deputy Muhsin is gone. Haniyeh is gone. Def is gone. Sinwar is gone. The reign of terror that the Iranian regime has imposed on its own people and on the peoples of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, this too will come to an end.
And that's Israeli Prime Minister, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu, with a powerful message after taking down another terrorist thug, this time the leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, who was the architect of the October 7th attacks on Israel that killed 1,200 people on that day. Joining me now with more is Fox News senior strategic analyst, retired four-star general, Jack Keane. General, great to have you this morning. Thank you so much for being here. Your reaction to Sinwar being taken out and where this war heads next?
Well, certainly it's very significant that Sinwar is gone finally. And what we're seeing before our eyes is obviously Prime Minister Netanyahu and the IDF is dismantling the leadership of Hezbollah, obviously the leadership of Hamas as well, and seriously degrading both of those forces. There's likely thousands of fighters still left in Gaza, but not as military organized units, capable of still resisting the Israelis in Gaza, for many weeks or possibly even months to go. But nonetheless, the leadership has been destroyed. Dealing with Hezbollah itself, there's three things happening there. One is to continue the decapitation of leadership. Two, destroy as much of the ballistic missiles, long-range rockets that they can. And three, push away the Hezbollah, who are operating in the south and firing rockets into northern Israel so they can reoccupy. That's the campaign that we see going on right in front of our eyes. I don't think the administration's optimism about a ceasefire is in the offing. And the reality is because the deputy political chief of Hamas, Al-Yahya, has just come out and said he agrees with Sinwar's mandate. The only way we're going to go to a ceasefire is Israel has to withdraw all troops from Gaza and go to a permanent ceasefire. Netanyahu is not going to do that. So it sounds to me like Hamas is in the same place it was prior to Sinwar's death in terms of a ceasefire.
Well, there's a lot of misinformation around this as well. I mean, Bernie Sanders, the senator from Vermont, just said that, Israel killed 42,000 people, but the number really is not clear cut because it includes Hamas, that number. And we know that Israel has been retaliating for an unprovoked attack on innocent Israelis on that day, October 7th. And ever since that happened, this administration has been calling for a ceasefire. It doesn't look like the Israelis are even sharing information with the U.S. anymore, given the constant chorus of ceasefire, when they're trying to protect themselves.
Yeah, now Prime Minister Netanyahu hasn't given up on obviously trying to get these hostages out. He's just not going to make a deal that the condition on the ground to do that is a complete withdrawal from Gaza. That would leave thousands of fighters still in Gaza able to grow and re-equip and rearm themselves and conduct another attack. He's not going to go along with a deal like that, and that's really the issue. He certainly wants those hostages out. He's committed to getting them out, but they've got to be on realistic terms, and that's not what we have here. The administration keeps hyping the fact that there's a ceasefire coming and the hostage is going to be released, and this happens every few weeks. We're close to a deal, and none of that has ever really been true, because Sinwar has always held the same position, which is a maximalist position: withdraw from Gaza. That's it. And that's not the case, and those conditions are not realistic.
DOJ is digging in. The Justice Department is suing the state of Virginia for cleaning up the voter rolls within 90 days of the election. The DOJ also suing the state of Alabama for its efforts to prevent non-citizens from voting, which is according to the law. Joining me now in the Sunday Morning Futures exclusive is Virginia Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl-Sears. Lieutenant Governor, it's great to see you this morning. Thank you so much for being here. I want to get your take on the DOJ lawsuit against Virginia. Where are we on that?
Well, we're moving ahead because the law says, and this is my shocked face, Maria, that the Democrats are making political controversy of a very, very simple process. And it's not that we, the government, are beginning this process. No, it started with the individual identifying themselves as a non-citizen and yet appearing on the voter rolls. How much more simple can you get than that? And so we are giving, the Youngkin administration is giving that person 14 days to prove that you are a citizen and therefore eligible to vote. And yet that's controversial. But wait for it. Even after, let's say, you're removed from the voter rolls, in Virginia, on the day of the election, you can still come and vote, providing, of course, that you later prove that you are eligible to vote. So your ballot will be held back. It's a provisional ballot, but you still have the ability. And let me tell you, this process was signed into law in 2006, over 18 years ago, by a Democrat governor. No problem, Maria. And
that's right.
It existed under two other Democratic governors. And suddenly there's a problem. You know that this is all political.
Well, this is going on across the country. I mean, look at the voter rolls in Michigan. Look in Arizona. The court rules that lawsuit to unmask 218,000 Arizona voters with no proof of citizenship will proceed to an evidentiary hearing. I mean, how many people are on the voter rolls that shouldn't be there right now? Can you characterize really the reality of inactives or illegals on voter rolls?
What we found over 6,000, maybe 6,300, I believe, people who identified that they were not citizens and yet they're on the voter rolls. Wow. So they have 14 days to prove that they are actually eligible to vote. And I then gave you the fail-safe caveat that they can come on election day and vote. We found people, Maria, who had been dead since